Now if you are going to till, the one thing you don't want to do, whether you're tilling up a spot in your yard for a garden. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Thursday, December 28th here in South Georgia. And now that our chickens are just about finished up on this plot here behind me, we're gonna assess, see how good a job they did at terminating this cover crop. Talk about some different ways you can get your garden prepped for spring, and talk about one thing you definitely don't want to do before you plant your garden. So our girls have done a phenomenal job grazing this cool season cover crop mix over the last month and a half, but it's time for them to move on. So the other day we had somebody asking, how long do we leave our chickens on a particular plot? And it just depends. Sometimes, like in this instance right here, we let them go 2 rounds. Sometimes I only let them go 1 round if I need the plot sooner than later. Other times I've let them go 3 rounds. In this instance right here, I think we're going to use this plot for some sweet corn next spring. 2 rounds should be enough. I found 2 rounds give you a good application of chicken manure, make some nice fertile soil. But if we wanted, we could take them around this plot one more time. We've definitely got enough vegetation, regrowth out there, enough stuff for them to eat without us having to rely on chicken food too heavily. But as we'll discuss here in a minute, I think I'll use that remaining vegetation for biofumigation purposes as opposed to continuing to use it for chicken food. So now let's talk about what we do next, the whole cover crop termination process. Now we've got some time here. We're going to plant sweet corn here. The earliest we're going to do that down here in South Georgia is probably mid to late March. So we've got 2.5, 3 months to work with, but it's something we need to go ahead and be thinking about. Because obviously we just can't plant sweet corn seeds into this stuff right here. There's going to have to be some level of soil prep to get this where we can plant it. So step number 1 in almost any kind of cover crop termination situation, notice I said almost any kind, would be mowing. So we got to chop this stuff down. Now if you've got a tractor driven tiller or a harrow, you can get away with not having to mow it down. You can just chop this stuff up. But most of us are going to have to mow it before we can cultivate it. As soon as I start trying to run my tiller through something like that right there, it's going to say and it's going to start choking up. So we're going to have to mow this down before we cultivate it. Even if we weren't going to cultivate this and we were going to tarp it, we still need to mow this down. Now we're going to talk about tarping a bit more here in a minute, but I have in the past tried tarping a plot like this, not mowing it, just putting a tarp on it. But what happens is you end up with all this dry, dead vegetation on top of the soil, and you have to rake it out of there anyway. You can't really make a furrow in it or plant into it, so I'd rather go ahead and mow it before I tarp it. So now let's talk a little bit about the tarp here and how this can be beneficial in a cover crop termination situation. So when terminating a cover crop, the tarp can be really helpful because it prevents you from having to till the snot out of a plot to get that stuff broken up so it won't come back. That plot where we're taking the chickens off of today, I probably have to till that 3 times if we were wanting to plant in it pretty soon. So the tarp gives us a nice little assist, excludes sunlight, helps us terminate that cover crop without excessive cultivation. And the tarp also serves as an excellent placeholder until we're ready to plant again. So we don't have to worry about fighting weeds when we have the tarp on a plot. Just going to keep it nice and cozy and weed free until we're ready. So we talked about mowing, we talked about tarping. Now let's talk about cultivation, which we're going to have to do at some level, even minimally, just to get seeds to germinate in this. They won't germinate in that like it is. So as far as cultivation goes, we've got several options. If we needed this plot ready in a 1.5 weeks, 2 weeks, we'd have to go with the till route. We just have to keep tilling it until it was all broken down and incorporated enough where it wasn't going to come back and we could get our seeds to germinate. Now that's definitely the fastest way, but not the best way. We would only do that if we were really crunched for time. Ideally, we like to plan ahead so we don't have to till to get this ready for spring planting. So the option I'm going for here in this plot is to till once and then tarp. because we have some brassicas growing out here, we've got this rapeseed growing out here, I do want to take advantage of the biofumigation effects that I can get with that. So I am going to till it once, going to incorporate that brassica vegetation into the soil, help kill any of those bad soil pathogens we may have. Then I'm going to throw a tarp on it, and shouldn't have to do much else until we're ready to plant in the spring. So using the tarp, I only have to till once. Without the tarp, probably going to have to till 3 times. Now last year for our spring sweet corn plot, we didn't till it all, and that worked pretty well. So what we did was mowed it first, of course, put the tarp on the plot, and then a few weeks before we were ready to plant in the spring, pulled the tarp off and we wheel hoed it as opposed to tilling it. Now it was a little bit of a rough go with the wheel hoe there, but we were able to get it ready to plant without beating up the soil with the tiller. Does it make that big of a difference as far as, you know, are you damaging that much soil biology tilling it one time versus wheel hoeing or using a hand hoe like a stirrup hoe? I don't think so, but the reason we did it last year was just to show people without a tiller that you can still utilize cover crops and terminate them effectively. So if you're one of those types that's like, hey, I've got a tiller, I'm going to use it, then you go for it. You till it on up. If you don't want to till as much and want to reduce your soil disturbance, you can till it once and then tarp it. And if you don't have a tiller at all, you can still do this. Just might be a little more work using a wheel hoe or a hand hoe. Now, if you are going to till, the one thing you don't want to do, whether you're tilling up a spot in your yard for a garden or, you know, terminating a cover crop in an existing garden plot, you don't want to till right before you're going to be planting. That's going to cause you a lot of problems, because every time we till, we're stirring up that weed seed bank. Not a big deal as long as we understand that that's what we're doing when we're out there tilling. That's why for this plot I want to till it now, put the tarp on it, let the tarp kill any of those weeds that I stirred up with the tiller. So tilling right before planting is one of the main reasons that gardeners, especially new gardeners, lose the weed battle. They go out there, till them up a spot, and they till it up enough to say, that looks pretty good, let's put some seeds down. They plant some seeds, and they don't realize what they have done is just brought all these weed seeds to the soil surface. They get some rain, temperatures start warming in spring, and those weed seeds go crazy, are popping up everywhere, and you got so many weeds that you can't get them all, and next thing you know, you're overwhelmed. Now, if you don't have a tarp or don't want a tarp or don't have the time to tarp, how do you solve this issue? So here's what I would recommend. If you're going to use a tiller to get your garden plot ready, you know, till it the last time several weeks before you're actually going to plant it. And if you're not getting any rain in those couple weeks, maybe run an overhead sprinkler. Try to get some of those weed seeds that you just stirred up, try to get them to germinate. Then go out there with a hand hoe, wheel hoe, stirrup hoe, something like that, something very light, and kill all those little thread-like weeds. You could also use something like a flame weeder, but the goal is not to till it, not to expose all those new weed seeds right before planting. Till it a few weeks before you plant, give those weed seeds time to germinate, give you time to kill them, and then you should have a much better chance at winning the weed battle. So there's no one-size-fits-all garden prep plan or cover crop termination plan that's going to work for everybody. Everyone's situation is different. Just understand what you're doing, understand what's happening when you're going out there with the tiller, and that will go a long way to helping you be successful in the garden over the long term. So just to recap, we're going to mow, we're going to till one time, we're going to tarp this until spring. Not going to do it today though. Really windy out here. I'll lose my battle with the tarp. And then for our girls here, where are they going next? So they're eventually going right here, right beside the plot they were just on. We've got a cover crop that's just starting to germinate out here, basically the same mix we had planted over there. Planted this so I could get it germinated during the little stretch of warm weather we had around Christmas. It's coming up good. Now it's cooled off a little bit. It may slow it down a little bit, but it all should fill in pretty nicely. And just as a side note, speaking of cover crop germination, here's a little cover crop we planted in this raised bed a few videos ago. It's coming up really well too. Probably need to give it a little splash today. Looks like we're gonna have nice coverage there. But anyways, back to where our chickens are going. I thought about putting them on this big plot here behind me. Obviously there's nothing out there for them to eat. Kind of drug my feet on getting a cover crop planted here, but at least we get fertilizer in one of our garden plots as opposed to just getting it in the yard. And I thought about moseying them down one of these pathways right over here to where we're going to be planting taters in about a month and a half. Still nothing planted here. We would have to give them some chicken food, but we could at least get a little fertilizer put down. So I'm not really sure what I'll do. I'll probably make that call later this afternoon. But speaking of taters, I got mine in the mail earlier this week. That way we can go ahead and start the green sprouting, aka chitting process. Get some nice sprouts on these before we go in the ground with them in mid-February. So I got 5 pounds of these 3. These are the varieties that will be going in the in-ground garden. We'll have a 30-foot row of each. Sharp O'Meara, we grew that one last year. Huckleberry Gold and Baltic Rose, which is one of our favorites. And then for the raised beds, I've got 1 pound quantities of these. Rose Gold, which we did last year. And then these 2, which I've never tried, Purple Viking and Charlotte. And if you've never grown potatoes before and are wondering how many pounds do I need, a 5 pound bag like this, once you cut it up, and we'll show that process here another month or so, 5 pound bag cut up is enough for a 30-foot row. A little 1 pound bag like this is perfect for a raised bed or a container. I think it was actually this variety here we did it with last year. We planted 1 pound like this, ended up harvesting around 35-36 pounds of taters. Now those results are not ideal, probably can't duplicate that every single year, but you can get a lot from just a 1 pound bag of seed taters. But anyway, if you haven't already, go to woodprairiefarm.com, check them out. If you decide to get some, be sure to use the code LazyDogFarm at checkout. And on the checkout page, they've got a little drop down box where you can choose your shipping date. You can let them choose the best time to ship them to you, or you can say, I want them right now, which is what I did. Don't ask me how they get seed potatoes from Maine to down here in Georgia without freezing this time of year, but they did. They feel just fine inside this bag. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, and let me know in the comments below what you think about cultivating before planting. Is it something you just do anyways, or is it something you try not to do right before you're going to plant? And I mentioned earlier about terminating a cover crop without tilling at all. If you want to see that process and see how we did it, watch this video right here. We'll show you how we got that plot ready for corn last year. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.